Hey everyone, it's Ian from the Cognitive Cow, and just to make all the whiny little conservatives upset, I'm starting this video the way I started the last video that got me in trouble, with makeup. Now I can't say... Anyway, uh, if you're applying lipstick, put on the clear gloss before the lipstick so that it will not only last longer, but your lips will stay moisturized because lipstick has a tendency to dry out your lips. So you use lip gloss to keep them moist. I'm sorry for using that word. Moist while the lipstick is on, so it doesn't dry them out. Anyway, welcome back to our series, Tales from the Closet, where we're in the closet and we're telling you tales. This week's story was written in retaliation to the recent Supreme Court decision that just legalized discrimination against gay people. You remember that court case from like 2018 when the bakery told the couple they wouldn't make them a wedding cake because they were gay? That's now law that you can discriminate like that. So this is 4th of July. God curse America. The good one, at least. Anyway, where we left off in the previous chapter, where did we leave off in the previous? Oh yeah, Yeshua went back in time with Abraham's family to stop the Council of Nicaea. They were successful, and they convinced Constantine and the 349 bishops to join them on their quest to stop the Bible from getting into the hands of future generations of xenophobic imperialists and turning the world into this sorry meat grinder it is today. So there are like 449 characters in the story now. So when they get back to the time-space continuum, you know, that giant blue hallway with all the bars and stuff and the doors and TVs, the bartenders get a little overwhelmed, as you can imagine. Some of you know what that's like because you are bartenders, but they send Isaac to the back to go get some more barrels of alcohol to drink the customers, that's worse, to give them more alcohol. So Isaac goes back to this dimly lit place where all the barrels are, and he's attacked by this glowing, burning figure. He doesn't know who it is, but the burning figure thinks he's God, but he's not God. But why is he trying to attack God? Let's figure out in this story. Chapter 4, Meet Chukwu. That's the title of the story. The mysterious burning figure identified himself as Chukwu, the god of an indigenous Nigerian tribe called the Igbo. "How did you get here?" Isaac asked. Chukwu answered, "It started in the early 1500s AD. Using his god powers, Chukwu created a screen in the fire above the puddle of spilled wine that was burning so Isaac could see what he was talking about." He continued, "Invaders from Catholic Portugal started colonizing the west coast of Africa, bringing their homophobic god with them. I was the god being worshipped in the kingdom of Kongo by the Igbo tribe in Nigeria. The Portuguese came with the illusion of peace, bearing gifts of wool, tools, and weapons, which they traded with my followers in exchange for gold, cotton, and ivory. Even the kings of Portugal made treaties with the Congolese king Nzinga Chukwu. I'm sorry if I butchered that pronunciation. Who would later change his name to Joao I when he converted to Christianity. Why did he have to change his name? Isaac asked. Chukwu answered, because the Portuguese colonizers who took over the country and forced everyone at gunpoint to convert to Christianity only preached and read the Bible to us in Spanish. That effectively made Spanish the national language, because everyone associated Spanish with Christianity. Mostly because the Portuguese called our native African languages heathen tongues. Heathen tongues? The word heathen didn't exist during Isaac's time period. What's a heathen? Chukwu explained. According to the colonizers, a heathen is anyone who doesn't live exactly how the old white preacher demands them to. Anyone who believed in equal rights for blacks, gays, and women, despite those groups being more than half the population, were deemed heathens and publicly executed in horrible ways. Now, I want to pause and point out that, yes, this is historical canon, the part about native indigenous languages being deemed heathen languages by Christian colonizers. They thought they were summoning demons by talking to each other for some reason. We don't exactly know why they hated them, but all evidence points to the fact that, like most Christians today, they hated minorities. Anyway, where were we? On the screen, Chukwu showed Isaac a scene of an old white Portuguese man beating a Nigerian lesbian couple with a whip. "Confess Jesus as Lord!" he screamed. "Never!" they cried, still holding on to each other. The old white man threw his whip down and drew a sword, screaming, "Then perish!" before slaying one woman and pouncing on the other like a lion on a gazelle, and did something we can't say on YouTube. That's also historical canon, that they did that to an indigenous women. And still do it today. Especially since Roe v. Wade's overturned and they think they can do it to whoever they want. Pigs. We witnessed a similar scene in Nicaea, Isaac recalled. In the marketplace, I saw a groom marrying a bride that was tied up while a choir praised God. So not even white people are safe from the wrath of Christians, Chukwu mumbled. Not even God's own followers, in my experience, Isaac confessed. But how did you get locked in this cellar? Chukwu answered. I couldn't stomach seeing my followers get raped, murdered, plundered, and enslaved by the Christians, so I confronted their God directly. On the screen, he showed Isaac a scene of him challenging the Christian God, barely Christian at this point. It's more like Trump than Christ. To a duel. Slavery, rape, and genocide are wrong, he declared. God replied, It's part of my divine plan. I work in mysterious ways. Which is actually an argument Christians use to justify these things. In case you've been living under the rock and haven't heard that. Some mysterious ways you have indeed, Mr. Perfect, Chukwu scoffed. That angered God. Doesn't take much. For it doesn't take much to anger him. He's poor in love and quick to anger, according to Republicans. You dare question my decree? He shouted the word decree so loud that it gave Chukwu a migraine instantly, and God tackled him to the ground, opened a portal, dragged him by the feet, kicking and screaming through the door, and all of the bartenders watched in horror as God dragged Chukwu down the hall to the 350 AD bar, opened the door, and threw him inside. "Never again shall history remember you," he declared as he slammed the door and locked it, and then the video ended. "What if I told you that wasn't the real God?" Isaac revealed. "No shit, Sherlock," Chukwu quipped sarcastically. "There's no such thing as a real God. All gods are real. Cultural imperialists made up the concept of gods being real and fake to justify the genocide of indigenous cultures." Isaac explained, "The God who has called me to follow him today acknowledges this, and is leading me and 449 other people on a mission through time to stop the spread of Christianity by imperial means. And ironically, this God just so happens to be Christ himself." "Impossible!" Chukwu exclaimed. "The Christian invasion of Kongo was personally overseen by Christ." "So you've been told," Lot retorted dramatically. He entered the room behind an angelic spy with his sons Moab and Ammon on either side. "This is Olmec," he explained. Now, Olmec in this story is non-binary, so I'm going to use they-them pronouns for this particular angel. "They are an angelic spy from Yeshua's father." Olmec the spy pulled a slide projector out of his backpack and turned it on, displaying an image of the fake God that told Abraham to kill Isaac. "This is Subject 0645-2017, he explained, "otherwise known as God. He is the one who authorized the Atlantic slave trade, not the real Christ." They flipped to the next slide, a picture comparing the traditional painting of Jesus used in churches to Caesar Borgia, son of Pope Alexander IV, and said, "The fake Christ that the European colonizers were preaching and using to justify their conquest was an idol, the image of Caesar Borgia, son of Pope Alexander IV." Now, this is actual canon. Pope Alexander IV was, like all popes before him and after him, a bloodthirsty tyrant. Except this one in particular was controversial because, one, he had like a gazillion wives, and two, he said he was God in the flesh. He thought he was not the second coming, but the coming of the God. And he had people paint Caesar Borgia, his son, as Jesus, and say that he was Jesus. You know, they painted him on crosses. They painted him at the Last Supper. Pretty much all the pictures you see of Jesus in modern times, the Renaissance paintings, aren't Jesus. They're Caesar Borgia. Who was his? And Pope Alexander, you guessed it, that's the creation of Adam, the God with the white beard. He doesn't look like that in the Bible. He doesn't look like any of this in the Bible. In fact, most biblical scholars agree that the real Jesus was black. Take that, white supremacist Christianity, specifically the Baptists. Jesus was the very thing you hate. You'll find that a lot if you actually study his word instead of hitting people over the head with it like you know the thing. Sorry for the rant, but I actually do believe that the God that Republicans worship today is not the same God that the apostles worshipped. There's just too big of a leap between the God that told them to be hospitable to minorities to the God who told them to be hostile to minorities in 325 AD. They just can't be the same. There wasn't even a... And I find it interesting, too, that there wasn't a Bible when Christians loved minorities, but there was a Bible when Christians started hating minorities. That's no coincidence, and that's why I specifically target the Council of Nicaea in this book that I've written, or that I'm writing, because it's not done yet. You can expect to see more like this in the coming future. So, to be clear, I'm not vilifying all Christians. I have, 11 Christian friends. Only 11 because they're hard to come by, but, I do believe there are still good human beings who are Christians, and I want especially gay Christians, black Christians, indigenous Christians, and I'm calling on them for help. We need their help to stop this violence. Ending hate isn't going to come from outside the source. It's going to come from inside the source. We need to infiltrate the church and rat out these racists and homophobes from the inside if we're going to see real progress. But anyway, back to the story. Pope Alexander IV was a mass murderer and rapist who forced several mistresses to bear him children. Caesar Borgia was one of his children, and he ordered him to be painted on a cross with white robes so he could call himself God. Because this was Europe's first artistic depiction of God, it's the only one most people know, despite it not being biblically or historically accurate. They flipped to the next slide, a picture showing what God really looks like according to Revelation, and continued, "This is what God really looks like." "Ooh," said the crowd. Yeshua transformed into his true form from the picture. "Ooh," the crowd said louder. He transformed back to the way he was and addressed the crowd. "I know the situation is shocking and confusing, but to stop this fake God from ruining Christianity and the world, we need to work together. I have seen the future. Billions will die horribly if future generations follow this God. Chukwu, will you join me and my crew on this journey through time to stop the bad Lord?" Chukwu hesitated for a second, but he let out a sigh and extended his hand out to say, "I'll do it." The crowd cheered as he shook hands with Yeshua, an alliance that the Republican God would never make because he's xenophobic, power-hungry, and greedy. Meanwhile, in the time period where Abraham was supposed to sacrifice Isaac but didn't, the right-wing impostor calling himself God was still searching the wreckage of Lot's cave with his excavation team. "Tell me you've found something," he demanded of the crane operator who was digging through the rubble. The cave wasn't even that big, roughly the size of a living room in the 20th century suburban house. The crane operator replied, My lord, everything that consisted or once consisted of cells was vaporized on impact. There is nothing left of the schemes they were working on. White God wasn't satisfied with that answer, so he declared, "Failure is a sin," and blew away the crane in a windstorm, along with the rubble he was digging through, not caring who got hurt in the process. That's when he found the floor of the cave, charred with the plasma of the portal that Yeshua had opened upon it. "Bingo!" he exclaimed, and he dug his hand into the crevice to pull out the portal. "You're mine now, Generation Z! Troops, into the portal! Follow me!" "Yes, sir!" said a legion of angels armed with AR-15s and suited in armor colored like the American flag. And they followed him through the portal, across the blank white nothingness, and to the door that led into the time-space continuum. From all the way down the hall, Abraham's company heard God banging on the door, trying to break it down. Turning the page, because it's a book. "What was that?" Chukwu asked. "It's him!" Abraham exclaimed. This caused a massive panic as bartenders, time travelers, and former servants and bishops ran down the hall screaming and yelling. God broke down the door, and his angels started shooting indiscriminately at anything that moved. Chukwu used his sun god powers to forge an AK-47 out of a fallen metal support beam, and Yeshua broke it and multiplied it like loaves and fish to give to the 450 people to defend themselves. They successfully stalled the fascist angels' initial advance, but the enemy started gaining momentum as the 450 dropped to 440, then 430, then 420, then 410. "I'm sorry, Sarah," Abraham cried while holding his wife's hand as they shot for their lives from behind a pile of tables, bodies, and wine barrels. "This isn't what I wanted. It's not your fault," Sarah reassured him. I wanted our family to go down in history, and we will go down in history, even if it's not as I hoped we would." "This isn't the end," said Yeshua, who was also shooting. "There is one alternate escape we can use." He shot a chandelier off the ceiling, and when it fell, the floor cracked like grass under the 410, causing them to plummet into what initially seemed like an abyss. "Ah!" they screamed as they fell. God led his troops to the mouth of the hole and looked into it to assure their fate, but even he couldn't believe his eyes. "Impossible!" he exclaimed. Now what's in this abyss, you might ask? Well, I don't know. I just frickin' wrote it. But I'll show you in the next episode, and it's gonna be interesting, as this is. Stay tuned for the next episode. I intentionally ended it on a cliffhanger so that you would want to know what happens next and you would wait for the next episode. So subscribe so you get the notification when that episode comes out. That's a great business plan. Why don't more YouTubers use this?